Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, September 6th, 2020, and today I'm going to be talking about Donald Trump's approval rating. So, as we look at our nationwide 538 average, Donald Trump's approval rating is currently at 44%. His disapproval rating is at 52%. This is pretty substantial given that Donald Trump never really has been approved of by the American public despite, being in office for the past 4 years. Throughout the entirety of his White House stay, he has never been approved of, other than in January 2017, and I mean that very literally. We take a look back at data all the way, ranging back. We're talking about February 2nd. He's tied. And then right after that, it takes off with the disapprove, and it's gone for him forever. I mean, he has not been approved of, and it's likely that he won't be. If he does lose on Election Day, well, it'll be the first time that a president has gone through an entire term of never being approved of once, other than right after their inauguration bid, which I think will be pretty substantial to say the least, and in a way embarrassing. Because Trump right now is underwater by 9% in terms of his unfavorability rating versus favorability rating, in terms of how he's handling the position as president. But I will say that the numbers were a tad bit better. Not a tad bit better, considerably better actually, back in March and April, and he actually hit around these numbers in May. But the national polling data still reflects Donald Trump underwater. You see, his approval rating might be up, and I think that the conservative media will tell you, because his approval rating is up, that his chances have automatically been increased in terms of, winning re-election. But realistically, that's just not true. In terms of the national numbers, Biden is up 7.5%. In terms of the generic ballot, the Democrats are up, by 7.2%. So roughly, the same margin that the Democrats are up on the generic ballot, they're also up on the national numbers. And get this, in terms of the disapprove versus approve of Trump's handling as president, it's also nearly the same as the presidential margin for Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. But Trump's approval rating being up does end up with a little bit of good news for the Trump campaign. As you can see, 538 expects the overall average on Election Day, on Election Day to be lower than it is right now, meaning Trump's approval rating will be higher and the disapproval rating will be lower. But then through the end of his first term, they expect it to be somewhere around 52% in terms of disapprove, and then approve going up to 45%. Now that is in no way good, but I will say that, it looks like it's on track to possibly increase if things continue, because as you can see, there's been a pretty significant increase and decrease in terms of disapprove and approve that all ends up with good news for Trump in terms of his favorability. But, back during this time period, he will never reach these March, April numbers where America approved of his COVID-19 handling by 11%. He's now disapproved of by that, negative 19% nationwide. So, in terms of comparing approval rating, on Election Day versus the re-election bid winners, Obama had a 52% approval rating on Election Day. He won his election. George W. Bush, 48% approval rating, won re-election. Bill Clinton, 54% approval rating on Election Day in 1996, won his re-election bid. George H.W. Bush, 34% approval rating on Election Day. He did not win his election. Now, Reagan, 58% approval rating, did win re-election by a very substantial margin. And Carter, 37% approval rating, did not win re-election. So yes, I will say that Trump being at 44% is close to George W. Bush's 48%. But it seems as if the same people who are disapproving of him are not voting for him, and that makes sense. I mean, looking at the numbers, they almost perfectly indicate what we see on the nationwide map. I mean, practically Biden is up by 8% if you round up. And if we take a look at who's approving of Trump and voting for him, there's a very clear correlation with those who approve of President Trump's job handling and then, those who disapprove voting for Biden. And I think that Trump's approval rating going up is something that was going to happen inevitably before Election Day. And if it does increase substantially back to a point where we could see numbers where Trump is at a 46% approval rating. Keep in mind, April 2020, Trump was at the highest approval rating of his entire presidency, February 2017 moving on. So at that point in time, he was very well on track to win the presidency. Very well. I mean, he wasn't leading in the key swing states, but the election was a lot narrower. I mean, heck of a lot narrower. We're talking about coming down to 278 to 260 in favor of Biden, just because if Trump had continued that trend, Trump would have been the favorite. But he was on track to do well if this trend had continued, but unfortunately for President Trump, it did not continue. In fact, it went down pretty substantially. He actually hit a low point for the first time, since January 2019. In July 2020, hit a 40% approval rating. But now it's back up. It's improved by around 3%. And if this does increase through Election Day, it could increase Trump's chances, as we're seeing a very direct correlation between the national popular vote and the popularity rating for Donald Trump. Now, in terms of the way that Americans view Joe Biden, he has a negative 1.6 overall average. And I know someone's going to say, oh, this is a favorable/unfavorable poll. Well, let's take a look at Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Joe Biden is doing considerably better than Donald Trump in terms of approval. I mean, we're talking about negative 13 for Trump and negative 2 for Biden. That's an overall spread difference of 11% in favor of Joe Biden. So Joe Biden is liked by a lot of Americans, but I think Donald Trump's approval rating really hurts because he has actual responsibilities. All Joe Biden has to do is campaign well, and that's what people are going to assess whether or not they like him as a person. And, believe it or not, people can't really put apart what you do as president versus you as a person, which is why these favorability ratings generally correlate with job approval. And yes, I will say that Trump was definitely disapproved of more before he won, but that's likely due to the fact that the Republican Party coalesced around Donald Trump as a candidate for this election. There wasn't exactly too many Never Trump voters in the primary because he was the only notable person running in the Republican primary. So it was very hard for anyone to come out and say, as a Republican, I don't like Donald Trump. The people who are doing it are being crucified. We're talking about Mitt Romney and the McCain family and a number of people that come out against Donald Trump that are being labeled as rhinos, people that are, was the 2012 Republican nominee for president and being labeled as a Democrat 8 years later, despite being, one of the more conservative members of Congress, serving from one of the more conservative states in the union, as someone who literally represented 60 million Republican Party voters in 2012. But I guess that's besides the point. I guess you could say just because this person isn't supporting President Trump that they are somehow a Democrat. People make really weird excuses for different things. But back to the approval rating talk. Donald Trump's approval rating will likely narrow up before Election Day, as 538 projects. But it is very possible that it doesn't. I mean, Trump has shown us that he can turn around an election in an instant, just not in his favor. I mean, yes, he did it in 2016, but did we see it in the midterm elections? No. Did we see it in any super notable special elections? One out of the, tens that occurred throughout this entire administration. In terms of everything that we're seeing now, Trump's numbers aren't improving. The RNC didn't give him too much of a bump in terms of nationwide data. I think we saw a difference of 1% from before the conventions versus after the conventions. After the RNC, Trump only increased by 1%. So Trump's approval rating, even though it is dwindling, the national lead is reflecting it. And he's going to need it to dwindle a lot more than what 538 is projecting. See, Trump being at this point with his approval rating is good news. I'm not going to take that away from him whatsoever. But I will say that he's going to need a little bit more than this 1-2% bump that's expected to give him by 2021. I mean, November is going to cut off sometime around here. And if it doesn't increase by a pretty substantial margin, he's probably going to join the likes of Jimmy Carter and George H.W. Bush, meaning they won't be winning re-election because their approval rating isn't too high. And, if we look, like I said, clear correlation between disapprove, approve, and Biden and Trump voters, and that makes sense. Also, we see it amongst Democrat and Republican voters. And I think this also outlines that Donald Trump is bringing down Republican voters with him, bringing down Republican candidates with him, bringing down the entire Republican Party. Because if we were talking about a different election and we were talking about, Mitt Romney being on the ballot or John McCain being on the ballot, and the Republicans were, in a contested Senate race, it is very possible that these Senate elections could have gone a lot better. But since Donald Trump's rhetoric has, excited his base, but no other part of the nation, I mean, he's holding on to 43, 44% in terms of his base, in terms of the approved population, which is very high. I mean, these people treat Trump like no other Republican candidate in the past, which is why he was so difficult to defeat in 2016 against all expectations. But is also why, Trump pandering to just his base isn't what's going to win him the election. Because of 2016's insane amount of third-party vote. I mean, we're talking about margins narrowing down significantly despite the Democrats practically improving by less than a percentage point. It was just Donald Trump pushed away so many voters. If you want a perfect example of that, check Arizona or Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District from 2012 to 2016. But third-party vote was very strong in 2016. And from what we've seen from these third-party voters is that 3 and 4 of them are backing Joe Biden for president. The rest are backing Trump or, get this, another third-party candidate this election season. So I will say that Trump's numbers are not good. The Republican Party is losing in key battleground states because of Trump in terms of their Senate races. Maine is a perfect example. North Carolina. We see it all across the country. possibly even Kansas, possibly Montana, Iowa, Arizona, states that Trump very well carried in 2016. Maybe not Maine, but he did, a lot better than Mitt Romney. Now, Joe Biden's taking it away by a pretty substantial margin. The Democrats are taking it away in the House races. They're taking it away in the Senate races. They're taking it away in the governor races. And this is due to the fact that you can't ride the coattails of a president with a 44% approval rating. And I know it's high. I mean, it's high for him, but the bar has just been set so low that if I, show Trump with a 44% approval rating, all of a sudden we think he's, done something dramatically different. Because his approval rating, besides this little peak before, has never really hit this point. I mean, we were talking about abysmal approval ratings throughout the entire campaign season, right up until around March and April. And that's when Trump was at his highest point. And if he continues this, even with the 538 average, we're going to need to see a pretty significant increase in terms of this expected growth for Trump if he is to win his reelection bid. Because to be completely honest with you, I don't see it happening. We're 1,324 days into his presidency, and he still has not been approved of since January 2017. No president can say the same. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my other 2020 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.